In Seattle, 16-year-old Nicole Walker lives with her father, Stephen, her stepmother Laura, and her half-brother Toby. Like a typical teenager, Nicole occasionally clashes with her father, especially when Stephen expresses his opinion on how she dresses. At work, Stephen talks to a colleague about a problem that needs to be resolved at school. Nicole goes with her friends Gary and Margot to a bar where, while Margot is distracted by a guy playing pool, Nicole spots the charming David playing with him. After placing their order, Nicole glances one last time at David before leaving with her friends. While relaxing at Margot's house, they talk about dating, and Margot invites her to a party. Unfortunately, Nicole declines the invitation because she needs to go to a James Taylor concert with her family. Margot's mom then informs the girls that Stephen has just arrived to pick up Nicole, and they say goodbye. When Nicole and Stephen get home, Nicole helps Laura prepare dinner while Stephen talks on the phone with a colleague, asking if they could have the meeting via conference call. After speaking with his colleague, Stephen tells the family that he can't go to the concert because he has to go to Vancouver. This escalates into an argument as disappointed Laura confronts him, saying he should keep his word to the family since going to the concert was his idea. Upset, Nicole leaves for her room while Stephen vents his anger by slamming the cabinet. Nicole immediately calls Margot to inform her that she will go to the party that night. Nicole and Margot attend the party, where they see the boy Margot likes from the bar. Margot wants them to greet him, but Nicole refuses and just watches her friend approach him. While there, David approaches Nicole and strikes up casual conversation. Suddenly, a fight breaks out at the party, and everyone starts running in different directions. David ensures Nicole's safety while he pulls her from the scene. They head to the rooftop, where David goes down first. As Nicole descends the stairs, the roof door swings open violently, and partygoers, including Margot and Logan, now holding hands, enter. Nicole calls out to her friend, but Margot just waves to her and says she'll see her later. The young woman continues her way when David leads her to a quiet spot overlooking the city. Nicole begins talking about her mother, who used to live with her in a big house in Los Angeles when she was only 9, while her father moved to Seattle. Nicole says her mother was sad most of the time and that it felt like she was the one taking care of her, not the other way around. David shows sympathy for her, and when he asks if she gets along with her father, Nicole replies that she is not sure since she moved a year ago. When it's Nicole's turn to ask something about David, he starts talking about his parents, saying he doesn't live with them but still talks to them. While David speaks, Nicole observes him, and he asks what she is thinking. Nicole admits that David is not what she expected when she first saw him, even calling him sweet. David then tells her she is beautiful and asks if she has any flaws so he can believe she is real. Flattered, Nicole responds that her curfew is midnight and she needs to go home. But instead of taking her home, David takes her hand and adjusts the time on his watch, delaying her by a few minutes. With that, David kisses her passionately, and as she reciprocates, David begins to touch her. Nicole gently pushes him away, apologizing and saying that he found her flaw, but David disagrees, saying that it is not a flaw but something else he can admire and respect. At home, Laura gets mad at Nicole for breaking her curfew, but Nicole explains that her watch broke. Instead of arguing with her, Laura tells Nicole to go to bed and take off her makeup, commenting that she looks like a prostitute. As soon as Stephen returns from his trip, he talks to Nicole and asks why she came home after curfew, questioning who the boy is she was with. Nicole replies that he is just a guy she met. When Stephen insists that he should know David, Nicole responds that she doesn't even know if she will see him again. As punishment, Stephen gives her chores in the kitchen and garden for 2 weeks, which Nicole accepts. As she leaves, Stephen also reminds her to apologize to Laura, but Nicole just gets annoyed and retorts that she will only apologize if Laura apologizes for calling her a prostitute. In her room, Laura tells Stephen that he is too easy on Nicole and that he should punish her. She thinks he is giving everything to Nicole, as if he is always trying to make up for something. However, Stephen is not pleased with Laura's words when she talked to Nicole, and Laura admits she made a mistake. At school, David seeks out Nicole and takes her to play pool. It is clear that Nicole is deeply in love with David. So, when he says he wants to meet her family, Nicole quickly agrees. She introduces David to her dad, who asks if he isn't in school with Nicole. David says that he might try college in the fall, adding that he is still exploring his options. As they talk, Laura arrives and asks Nicole to help her in the garden, but Nicole says she needs to change. David politely interjects and offers to help Laura. Toby, who immediately likes David, asks if he can join them, and everyone looks at Laura, who accepts David's offer, who even teaches Laura some gardening techniques. Nicole and Margot can't help but feel impressed. After working in the garden, David asks Laura where he can wash up, and Stephen directs him to the bathroom. While David cleans up, Margot asks Stephen to take her to the amusement park, but he just laughs in response. David then calls Nicole and casually asks her to get him a soda, catching Stephen's attention. While Margot convinces Stephen to join them, she intentionally leans down to tie her shoe, almost exposing her backside to Nicole's father. Stephen sees David watching him while he looks at Margot, making him feel guilty and uncomfortable. Nicole then hands David the soda, and he says he still needs to pick up Logan. Nicole goes to get her things with Margot following her, and as soon as Stephen and David are alone, Stephen reminds David that Nicole's curfew is midnight. David says he understands, but as soon as Stephen turns away, David adjusts his watch's time before leaving. Through the monitors, Stephen sees David helping Nicole into her car, placing his hands on her backside, making Stephen feel uncomfortable. At the amusement park, Nicole and David can't keep their hands off each other and continue to enjoy themselves, and when Nicole observes Margot and Logan, she feels uncomfortable seeing them kiss. Back home, Stephen misses his work deadline, unaware that David adjusted his watch. He then tells Laura he needs to return to Vancouver and even invites her to join him, which she accepts. As Stephen and Laura prepare to leave, Laura makes sure Nicole and Toby have the hotel number and reminds them to be careful. Then Stephen reminds Nicole not to let anyone into the house. Later that day, Nicole calls David and informs him that her parents are out of town, but David tells her he promised to help some friends with something. Hearing the disappointment in Nicole's voice, David asks if he can come to her house later, and Nicole says yes. She then gives him the security code for the house, adding that she will wait for him. That night, David enters the Walker's house, wandering silently and looking at the family photographs. He then goes to Nicole's room, where he finds her asleep, then opens her jewelry box to examine its contents. He looks at Nicole and gently removes her blanket, revealing that she is only in her underwear. When Nicole opens her eyes, she sees David naked beside her. Sitting next to Nicole, he removes the little clothing she has and begins to kiss her. The next day, David arrives at Nicole's school to pick her up and sees Nicole hugging Gary goodbye. David becomes jealous and, without thinking, attacks Gary repeatedly, hitting him even as he is already down. Nicole tries to stop him but ends up getting hurt in the process. Realizing that Nicole is screaming and crying, David asks her to come with him, but Nicole screams for him to leave her alone. At home, when she finishes taking a shower, Nicole notices that David accidentally gave her a black eye. Laura suddenly knocks on the door and asks if she can come in, and when she does, she asks Nicole what happened to her face. Nicole lies, saying she got hurt during volleyball practice, and as she tells this, Laura covers her bruise with makeup. Minutes later, downstairs, Nicole tries not to look directly at her father, fearing what he might say. As soon as Nicole walks out, Stephen asks Laura what was going on, and Laura tells him what Nicole said, adding that she gave Nicole a little makeup lesson. As Nicole and Gary walk down the school hallway, they talk about how David attacked Gary. Unbeknownst to both, David is listening behind them. After Nicole's class, she goes to her locker and finds a note from David asking for forgiveness and begging to meet at the bar where they met. David waits for Nicole at the bar, and when she doesn't show up, he becomes very frustrated. At home, Nicole receives flowers from David, which she immediately throws away. Laura just watches Nicole, hoping her stepdaughter will tell her what happened, but Nicole remains silent. That night, Laura and Stephen hear Nicole sobbing, and when Laura decides to check, she asks Nicole if the flowers were from him. Nicole replies that yes, and then tells Laura how David suddenly changed and assaulted Gary. Hearing her daughter's story at the door, Stephen enters Nicole's room and asks if David was responsible for her black eye. Crying, Nicole says she already told how she got hurt, and while she locks herself in Laura's arms, Laura asks her husband to let her handle Nicole. When Stephen is about to leave, Laura asks him to toss her a tissue. Stephen accidentally drops it, and as he bends down to pick it up, he finds a pack of contraceptives on the floor. Instead of confronting Nicole about that, he tells her that no matter what he did in the past that she didn't like, it's not enough reason for her to ruin her life. Confused, Nicole replies that she doesn't know what he is talking about, and Stephen says that's what worries him. Nicole then claims that not all of her moves have to do with him. However, Stephen disagrees with Nicole and says that while she lives under his roof, she will follow all of his rules. Stephen insists that something is wrong with David, adding that he is not a good guy. Upset, Nicole tells her father that no matter what happens, this will be between them. After talking to Nicole, Laura asks her husband what he thought. Stephen then shows Laura the pack of contraceptives and asserts that he knows David assaulted Nicole. Nicole picks up the envelope she threw away with the flowers and finds her photo with David inside. The next day, Nicole tells Margot what happened, saying that David didn't mean to hit her. As they talk, Logan and his friends show up, and before David can speak to her, Nicole leaves. He quickly catches up to her, and before she can go, David asks for a minute to talk. David explains, claiming he didn't know it was Gary hugging her and that all he saw was a guy with his hands on her. He says he would do anything to protect her, and that he would kill anyone who tried to hurt her. David apologizes for what happened with Gary and promises it won't happen again. Nicole believes him. When Stephen gets home from work, he is surprised to see David in his house. David is in the pool with Nicole, Laura, and Toby, and they are playing and having fun. Stephen even sees David pushing Nicole and Laura into the pool, which confuses him. When Laura gets out of the pool, Stephen asks her why David is there, and she asks if he would prefer that Nicole lie and go out to see David. Lost for words, Stephen can only watch as David kisses Nicole in front of him. Later, Stephen begins investigating David and discovers that he lied to Nicole about his parents. Stephen calls Laura to tell her about his discovery. It turns out that while growing up, David was indeed moved from one foster home to another and then to an institution until he was expelled upon turning 18. Uninterested in Stephen's findings, Laura says David probably lied to Nicole just to impress her since he must be embarrassed for being an orphan. However, Stephen is not satisfied with that and replies that David is making him uneasy. Determined to keep David away from his daughter, Stephen goes to Nicole's school, knowing that David will show up to pick her up. As soon as David arrives, Stephen says they need to talk and asks David to follow him to the corner. David follows him, and Stephen directly orders him to stop seeing Nicole. Irritated, David tries to turn the situation around on Stephen, piling up his flaws. David says he knows Stephen left Nicole when she needed him most and that things are falling apart for him at work. He continues insulting Stephen and declares he knows he is not fulfilling his part of the deal with his wife. Stunned, Stephen threatens to hurt David if he doesn't disappear from his family's life. Furious, Stephen drives away, and as he does so, David repeatedly hits the exact spot where Stephen touched his chest. Still furious, Stephen consults his lawyer friend, Alex, about what they can do to keep David away from Nicole. Alex informs him that although David has a history, everything could come back on them. Determined to get rid of David, Stephen says he will not just sit back and do nothing about it, so Alex says he will make some calls to see what they can do. At home, Nicole confronts Stephen about having assaulted David, saying she saw all his marks. This shocks Stephen, and he denies having assaulted him, but Nicole doesn't let him finish explaining and calls him a hypocrite. Before leaving, she tells him that he just lost her respect. Nicole leaves the house, and as Stephen follows her, she gets into David's car before speeding off. This makes Stephen even angrier. David and Nicole kiss in the car, and for the first time, Nicole tells David that she loves him. After that, David takes Nicole back to her house and asks if she is sure she doesn't want to go with him. When Nicole says she can't, David leaves, but Nicole changes her mind and drives to David's house. Realizing there's a party, Nicole approaches the house and, as she gets closer, sees Margot and Logan through the window using illicit substances. David then appears and forces Margot to tell Logan that she wants him, and when she does, David carries her over his shoulder to another room. Fearing what she just witnessed, Nicole quickly drives back home. The next day, Nicole leaves an apology note for her father, and when David shows up at her school, Nicole makes a scene and tells him to stay away from her. Gary comes to Nicole's aid, asking David to leave her alone. Later that day, Margot visits Nicole, and Nicole confronts her about what she saw at the party. Margot says David forced her to do that, but Nicole doesn't believe her and ends the friendship with Margot before shutting the door in her face. Margot begs Nicole not to leave her, saying she is her only friend, but Nicole just ignores her. Margot leaves, and David follows her, demanding that the heartbroken girl stop. Margot, however, ignores him and keeps driving, but when she almost collides with another car, she finally parks. David then hits her and asks what she told Nicole, but Margot insists she didn't tell anything. David then goes to Nicole's house and apologizes to Stephen, but he is not interested in his apology and slams the door in his face. When David gets home, he carves Nicole's name into his chest, showing his obsession with her. The next day, Stephen finally resolves his work problem. Meanwhile, after seeing Nicole with Gary, David follows the young man, and on his way home, Gary is brutally killed. Back in Stephen's office, he finds his car in the parking lot completely wrecked, with an insulting note from David. He borrows his co-worker's car and tries to call Laura and Nicole, but when they don't answer, he calls Margot to ask where David lives. At the mall, David corners Nicole in the bathroom, covering her mouth and pinning her against the wall, insisting that her dad is just jealous of them and that's why he is separating them. David adds that everyone wants what they have, but they cannot let others take it away. When another woman enters the bathroom, David kisses Nicole goodbye and leaves. Finally reaching David's residence, Stephen breaks in and finds a family photo in one of the boxes. David replaced Stephen in the photo with his own image, and Stephen also finds Nicole's underwear and a bracelet, replacing the initials with his name. Enraged, Stephen vandalizes the house. David and his friends show up just to find the home destroyed. When David realizes it was Stephen who did this, they decide to go see Stephen as a form of retaliation. David and his gang head to the Walker residence, planning to break in. Meanwhile, Margot arrives first and informs them all that Gary is dead and that his body was found beaten in the woods. David and his friends decapitate Kaiser, the Walker family's dog, and when Toby calls for him, they place the dog's head at the back door. Laura and David try to call for help on the phone and through the security system, but nothing works. Despite the chaos, Laura assures everyone that everything will be fine, no one can enter without the security code. However, Nicole informs her father that David has that code. Stephen rushes to the door and shuts it just as David is about to enter, and through the peephole, David taunts Stephen before demanding that he let him in. Thirsty for revenge, David and his friends make several attempts to get in. Meanwhile, Stephen instructs Nicole to take Margot and Toby to the bedroom and stay with them. Laura grabs the flashlight and along with Stephen, turns off all the lights in the house. With a drill, one of the guys manages to break the glass on the door, and when he goes to open it, Stephen strikes his hands with a fireplace poker. Logan tries to break down the other door, but Laura and Stephen barricade it with the refrigerator. Upstairs, Nicole uses an umbrella to push the guy trying to enter her room through the window. After seeing the light from the security office, Nicole starts using a flashlight to send a help signal. Meanwhile, Laura grabs the fallen drill and uses it on another man's hand to keep him out. David and his friends see the security car approaching, and with David's help, Logan tries to incapacitate the security guard. However, they fail, and when Stephen appears, he tells the guard Larry that he's okay and then punches Logan. Unfortunately, David's friend Terry shoots and kills Larry. Stephen tries to get back inside the house, but Logan stops him and hits him. Using Stephen as a hostage, David and his gang finally get Laura to open the door. Inside, they cuff Stephen and Laura while Toby escapes through the window and walks across the roof. He then gets into his mother's car and uses the car's phone to call for help. In Nicole's room, Logan breaks down the door and attempts to force himself on Nicole. Margot helps her friend by jumping on Logan's back, but the man overpowers her and repeatedly hits her against the wall. Toby manages to start Laura's car engine and runs over Terry before calling emergency services again. Toby returns inside the house, where he sees his mother gagged and tied up. He goes out again to get the keys to the handcuffs. Meanwhile, upstairs, David shoots Logan in the head for trying to force Nicole to do something. He then tells Nicole to say goodbye to her father, and as he is about to shoot Stephen, Nicole pleads with him not to do it. As David distracts himself talking to Nicole, Laura, now free, goes to Stephen and unshackles him, giving him the chance to attack David. Unfortunately, David is too quick for Stephen and manages to take him down. When David is about to shoot Stephen again, Nicole stabs him in the back with a piece of pipe. David then tries to approach Nicole, but Stephen stops him, plunging them into a physical struggle. Despite his injuries, David remains strong and manages to overpower Stephen. However, with all his remaining strength, Stephen finally tosses David out the window, resulting in his death. With David finally out of their lives, Nicole and the others embrace, happy to be rid of a group of lunatic men.